The Tooele City Council and the Redevelopment Agency of Tooele City are meeting in a work meeting. This meeting is being held at Tooele City Hall in the council chambers located at 90 North Main Street in Tooele, Utah. This is also being streamed on the Tooele City YouTube channel. We will move to our second item, which is a roll call. Councilwoman Manzione.
Present.
Councilman Hanson.
Present.
Councilman McCall.
Present.
I'm Councilman Brady. I'm also present. Councilman Graff is asked to be excused this evening. We'll move on to item 3, which is the mayor's report.
Thank you, Chairman and Council. I just wanted to give you a quick update tonight on our animal shelter. And we've had an issue with it being full at capacity. And so we have been no longer accepting surrender dogs or cats, which means when a pet owner has a dog or a cat that they no longer want, we're asking them to take care of their own responsibility. And so we are no longer accepting any surrender dogs or cats. And this really has helped us reduce the number of animals in the shelter to a manageable number. So we, of course, will make sure that we always have room for strays or for animals that are a potential safety risk to our residents. So we're asking residents when they have seen a stray or there's a stray that's out, if they don't know who it belongs to, they just need to call dispatch and they will call out animal control to come and get that stray. We're hoping that pet owners will be responsible. They'll have that animal licensed with the city and make sure their vaccinations are updated and that they've got the tag on them so that we can quickly return them to the owner. Of course, our responsibility is to protect the safety of our residents. And so, of course, if there is a dangerous animal or they know someone, an animal that has bit either another animal, a dog or cat has bitten another animal or a person, again, we want them to call dispatch and we'll get those animals and we'll take care of them. And right now, when our officers have picked up a stray that they've seen several times before and they know who the owner is, rather than take it all the way down to the shelter and go through that process, we'll take it back to the house, but the owner is still going to pay for us and for our time to do that. And that's the responsibility of the pet owner to make sure that they do that. But we're going to kind of streamline that process. And then we have reached out now to a fairly new local rescue organization, and they are going to be working with us to take those adoptable strays and get them adopted out. That has also taken a tremendous amount of time at the shelter, so that will really help us. So we're really excited about that, and we'll be bringing a contract at one point to get that going. So the only other item that I want to announce that you already know because you were there last night, but the Tooele County Council voted to approve the third quarter sales tax funding for our Drew Bay Road project between Smelter and Vine Street. And this is going to go out to bid in January, so it should be completed next year. And it will include a widening of the road. It will include curb and gutter and a paved 8-foot walking trail. This will be for non-motorized, but the walking trail will be on the east side of the road. So we are excited to connect our England Acres Trail that, if you did not notice, was finished today. It is now all paved, and this will be able to connect that trail up to the Middle Canyon Trail with the county. And then there will be really just a short distance where now we can connect the trails to the new trail that the county is putting in that really is mostly on city property up there in the hills. And I guess they're doing a contest to name that trail. So we're excited to get all of these connections done. So we're grateful for the vote last night that we'll be able to get that road done. So that's my report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll move on to item 4, which is the council members' report. We will start with Councilwoman Manzione.
Okay, it's been a while because of Thanksgiving break, so I unfortunately missed most of all the Santa stuff, but I saw pictures and it looked really fun. But I did want to just give a shout out to the awesome concert hosted by the Arts Council on Monday night. It was really fun, and the Tooele High School auditorium was packed full. There were very few seats left, so I think they were a great group. They brought the Christmas spirit. It was really awesome, and the Arts Council is doing some really great things. They're looking forward to some announcements in the near future that will benefit our city and be great. And then I also just wanted to thank everybody who has participated in the Harris Community Village open house ribbon cutting. It was really great. It's going to be a great place. And I know a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into that, and it's going to benefit our community. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Councilman Hanson.
Well, while Marisa was in Florida in the sun, we were in 20-degree
It was
weather at
warm.
the parade. Yeah. But the parade was good. Not a lot of people out of the parade, but lots of people at the park and for the lighting, and the Downtown Alliance were down there doing lots of good stuff. So it was fun to be there and be part of that. The Downtown Alliance, we had their monthly meeting the other day, and they got lots going and getting ready to get their 501c3 going and get that so we can get a lot going downtown with them. So I'm excited about that happening, and Merry Christmas and have fun in the holidays. There's lots going on.
Yeah.
So every day there's something else we could do, right? But yeah, so anyway, glad to be here.
Thanks. Councilman McCall.
Again, I forgot. I know I've done a couple of things.
That's how I was. I was like,
and I keep forgetting to write them down. But
Old age does that to you.
I know old age does do that to you if I don't write it down. So I really don't.
Okay.
I mean, other than hanging out with you guys yesterday.
Yeah, that was always
fun.
fun, huh? All right, I attended the Santa Parade. That was a lot of fun to walk, and it's always fun to throw out candy and see the kids, and sometimes parents get pretty excited about that too. But after I went to the park, and then I walked over to another man's treasure that's owned by Tyson Hamilton, and just saw the big smile on his face. There was a lot of people in there, so I know that it really does benefit our small businesses to have these events. And I talked to him for a second. He said, "I love this. This is awesome." So hopefully we keep doing events like that and benefit those small businesses. All right, we'll move on to our discussion items. The first discussion item we have is a discussion on a sewer lift station. This is presented by Jamie Grandprix, the Public Works Director.
Councilman Brady, you went too quick. I wasn't quite ready yet. Okay, so I have a presentation this evening to talk about lift stations. The presentation I put together, I do have a few slides. It is kind of meant to be discussion as well. I hope that I have prepared the presentation that for everybody that it makes sense, that I didn't use too much of my lingo in water and sewer that you might not understand. So if I do start talking about something you're not quite sure what that is, yeah, by all means, answer or ask a question or stop me, and so we can talk about it. So
we're kind of shy.
so am I. So I kind of go through things. I've got the slides. I got a couple of things that I'm just going to talk about as we go. We'll try to at least touch on everything as we get through the presentation. So this is a sanitary sewer lift station presentation. This has kind of been brought about by a development that might be happening in the northwest, or not northwest, but northeast side of town that might need to use a lift station. In the past, we've kind of have not looked at lift stations as an option to move and convey wastewater to our water reclamation facility. However, I think there's been some technologies in the last few years that I'm going to present on that might be an option, and so that's kind of my reasoning to come to you this evening, is just to kind of give you an idea of what we have that's available and what we think as a Public Works Department would like to see. So a sewer lift station, is defined as a facility that is defined as a facility that is designed to move wastewater from a lower elevation to a higher elevation through a forced sewer main. Some developments, and we do have some commercial developments in town, and I'll talk about a little bit in the presentation, that are too low for the sewer that's located out in front of them, and so they have to lift their wastewater into our gravity-fed system. That could be the same with developments, having to take their whole development and lift that sanitary sewer into a gravity-fed system. Key elements of a lift station include the wastewater receiving wet well. It's often equipped with a screener grinder to remove coarse materials, pumps, and associated piping. Tooele City over the years have operated the city-owned sewer lift stations. Those have been removed from the system due to development. So that's kind of the plan. Usually if a city can, and like Tooele City being a unique system, is it's all gravity fed, as our water reclamation facilities at the northwest end of town. And so for the most part, most of the elevation all goes that way. And so it works well, gravity fed. We don't even have to pump from the end of the system into our water rec as that gravity gets it all there. In some cities, that's where you usually find a lift station at the end of the line, and so then it takes that wastewater, pumps it up, and runs it into the treatment area of the facility. And so Tooele is unique, which is a good thing, and so that helps, and that means that we don't have a large lift station at the end of the town. So, like I said, this presentation is meant to be a discussion, just kind of discuss and talk about some lift stations. 3 of them that are out there that are ones that get used most often are the traditional wet well or wet pit lift station. That's most common. That's ones that developers like to use, cities like to use for the most part. Unless it's a large flow, then they might go with a dry pit lift station or a vacuum feed, or I should have put that up there, suction lift, vacuum feed or suction lift station. Kind of the same thing. So that's kind of the 3 that I'm going to kind of talk about this evening. And so it's probably going to be kind of a dry presentation, but no pun intended there. So lift station examples. So I kind of broke the presentation into a few different categories. I have the lift station examples, which I kind of take an engineered drawing of each one, and then just kind of a couple of pictures just to give you an idea of what each one looks like. And then I will go through amenities, what's kind of nice to have, some of the features of what a lift station should have, pros and cons of each type of lift station, our recommendations from a public works department of what we would like to see in a lift station. I'm going to just touch briefly on a commercial single-use lift station, and then kind of a typical layout of a lift station. And so to go with the first one is a wet pit lift station. So this is an engineered drawing of a wet pit lift station. Most common, usually has a couple of vaults. You have the wet well and then the valve vault. The valve vault being the dry vault, the wet well, being the wet vault. The 2 pumps, at least a minimum of 2 pumps, are located in the wet well, which ends up being kind of a maintenance disaster type lift station, but we'll get into that a little bit. So so it has the 2 submersibles in there, and that's kind of what an engineered drawing of that lift station looks like. If we go on to the next slide, I have a couple of pictures of 2 clean lift stations. These are what they look like before they hit wastewater. And I kind of used the clean example just to give you an idea. You can see the 2 pumps at the bottom. You can see the piping, the electrical cables that are going into the lift station, and the railings the technology they have now, or at least maintenance that they've done, is they put the pumps on rails, and so it's easier now to get the pumps out of the lift station using the rail system, as long as the rail system doesn't get beat up with the wastewater and the gases. So stainless steel is always a good option of when you put this kind of stuff together. The stainless does a lot better in wastewater than galvanized that gets ate away, and after 10, 15 years, you don't have rails anymore because they've been disintegrated. So So that's kind of a wet pit lift station. And then we go into the dry pit lift station. Now, I got my engineer drawing. It is kind of busy. It's got a lot of stuff right there. But basically, I just want you to see that it has two vaults, has a wet well and a dry well. And so the dry well being where the pumps are, the wet well being where the wastewater is located. It just has basically a pipe that goes over to the wet well that comes from the pumps. So there's not a whole lot of stuff that's in the wet well, which makes it a little bit more easier for maintenance. But it still does have, it still has two vaults that you have to contend with. So going to the next picture, I have just some pictures of a dry pit lift station. The first picture up there in the upper left kind of just shows the grinder vault, wet well, the dry pit, kind of just how one would be set up. The lower picture there shows 3 pumps and a wet well or a dry in the dry vault. Notice that that's still an underground vault, has stairs that go down to it. Just so that's, you can go and work on the pumps, you have to still go down into a vault. And so then the picture to the right just kind of shows another layout of the dry pit and the wet well. And it kind of just pointing out certain things. So when we talk about pros and cons, it kind of gives you an idea of kind of some of those pros and cons when we talk about those. You might have some questions when we get to that point. There's several styles we can do this with this. So your options are kind of endless. However you want to kind of set it up. So depending on if you want to do, the square vaults, rectangle vaults, or still do like a manhole style wet well with the square vaults, you can custom make a lift station this way fairly easy. So it does give you a lot of options. And then the other option that's came is fairly recent, a few years out. Since they came up with these, but the vacuum feed lift station, which is basically a packaged kind of pump system that sits on top of the wet well. So you still have the manhole vault and you have a vacuum pump system that sits on top. And then it just creates a vacuum, sucks that water up through the pumps and then into the system, into the force main. And so you still, another option where you don't have a whole lot in the wet well. Has all your stuff is sitting on top. And then from the pictures you can tell that I have a couple of pictures of the packaged vacuum pump system on the left. And all that's at grade, right? That's all right out in the open. You open up the doghouse and you have access to your pumps. There's no confined space requirement here other than the wet well, but having hardly anything in the wet well means you don't have people going into the wet well. And so a lot of your maintenance is done without having to worry about your confined space stuff. And then the picture on the right just kind of showed kind of the whole wet well and the packaged vacuum system sitting on top. Okay, so that's our 3 lift stations, really quick. Any questions to that point?
Kind of telling me how the dry system works. Because you got one vault that's wet and one that's dry. I got that, but how does that work I get the wet one. I understand that, and it's pretty simple, but.
You want to go back to those pictures really quick? So on a dry pit, you have your wet well. It has a pipe. It has the pipe that goes into the wet well. So if we're looking at the right picture, you see the piping going into the wet well. And so those are kind of like flooded suction pumps. And so they're always kind of flooded with the wastewater. And so once they get a certain level into the wet well, the pump kicks on and pumps that wet well down. And so the pumps are still in a dry portion of the lift station. And you just have the piping going from the dry side to the wet side.
Okay, yeah, I get it now.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So onto amenities, I kind of looked at just some options with amenities. And so I come to you from previous employment. I've operated lift stations in the past. And so I do have a pretty good background with lift stations. And I've operated the wet wells type systems and the vacuum type systems. And so when it comes to just some amenities for a lift station, it's nice to have them, a CMU block building that's located with the lift station just to house all the electrical SCADA stuff that's controlling the lift station. So we usually do kind of a CMU building, chain link fence and barbed wire around the facility, usually a davit crane or a jib crane to help lift the pumps out if you're going to have like a wet well type system. Or even with the dry pit, you might still need to lift pumps out every so often. Diesel generator, lighting for night work and just security of the site. And then a hard surface, usually asphalt or concrete is kind of desired, or a crushed concrete surface. And then kind of going on with amenities onto the next slide, we still have some more. A grinder as part of the system as well, especially with the wastewater that's coming to us now. Has got quite a bit of garbage stuff that's with it, that grinders help knock that down so the pumps don't get clogged up with bigger material. And then it's always nice to be able to flow. You have to have a flow meter, and so an ultrasonic flow meter with a partial flume is always best when it comes to metering the wastewater. Wastewater is a little harder to meter through just a meter unless you're using some type of ultrasonic where it doesn't have to go through a meter itself. And then the other amenity that's nice to have is a wastewater sampler. Usually with permits, with our UPDS permit, our wastewater permit that we have for our treatment facility, we have to sample the influent and effluent wastewater streams, and so sometimes that wastewater influent stream will have to be sampled, and that's where the sampler comes into play. So that's always a good option to have as part of amenities.
What do we do now for the wastewater sampler?
They're located at the facility itself, the water rec facility. We have two of them located on the facility, and that's what we use. So whenever you have a lift station, then sometimes you have to monitor that flow that's coming into your lift station or the water quality of that lift station, and so you'll have to have a sampler for that lift station as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so you'd want one at your lift stations, and we have to have them at the wastewater facility.
Okay, thank you.
So pros and cons of each type. So a wet pit, and I could sit here and I could probably put 40 slides together of pros and cons for each lift station. So I just kind of did the top 3 or 4 just to kind of give you an idea of some pros and cons of each one. So a wet pit lift station, the pros, it's a traditional approach. They're more common, they're cost effective, footprint's usually a lot less. Is higher maintenance costs. The pumps and equipment are located within the wet well, and there are confined space requirements with those. So even though you've got pump that's on rails, if the rails don't work or something falls apart, you still might have to go into that wet well. So there are some confined space requirements for that. Dry pit lift station, pros being the pumps and equipment are located in a dry vault, so that makes maintenance a lot easier. So the maintenance costs come down. We still have confined space requirements as we have a vault that we still have to access. It needs a larger footprint, having the 2 vaults that have to be put in, so it tends not to be cost effective. And then for the vacuum feed, I can come up with more pros than cons. The pumps are equipment located in the doghouse on top of the wet well. Maintenance is a lot easier, lower maintenance costs. Your confined space requirements are pretty much gone or limited. Better overall performance of the 3 options that I presented on. And then cons, it's not as cost effective and then needs a larger footprint. And so as we kind of get in cost and lifespan, I kind of was working on this, and prior to getting slides to Loretta, I wasn't able to get this kind of all filled out, so I have just a printout.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So with this, we have the 3 types. A wet pit type lift station are great when the flows are less than 1 million gallons per day. That's 700 gallons per minute. That's quite a bit of flow when it relates to a development that's coming in. Usually when you're talking flows, if you're talking 1 MGD or greater, that's more of just the end of the line type lift station than it is just a developer doing one for a development. So a wet pit is a good option for that type of stuff. You're about $500K to $1 million, give or take, depending on if it has a building or no building. Sometimes they'll do the electrical just right out on some unistrut outside with a little lean-to over it, which is not always good, because if you're having to work on the electrical, sometimes you don't want to do that when it's raining or snowing outside. So that's why I always like to have all of that inside a building. Your pumps will last about 10 years, give or take, and the structure should be 50 years. With the dry pit, that's flows that are greater than $1 million. That's usually when those come into play. They're $2 million price tag, easily, probably, for the most part. It's always kind of hard. There's a lot of things that come into play with lift stations and a lot of factors, and so when I'm putting pricing down, it's all depending on flows and what that kind of lift station's gonna be. And so when I have the dollar sign at top, that means, you know, it's usually the cheaper option, $3 signs, there is more money, $2 signs is a little less, or is, you know, in between. And so it all kind of depends on the development and what their flows are. When I'm saying $500K to $1 million on a wet pit, that's probably at around the 700 gallons per minute mark. So if you're getting a flow less than that, you know, the price will come down. So in a dry pit, the pumps are approximately 15 years, you know, they'll last about 15 years. Another 50 years on the building and the structure. Vacuum feed, another option for flows that are under 1 million gallons per day. And I got that about the same price as a wet pit, but they'll tend to be a little bit more. It could be a little bit more. If you're 500K on a wet pit, you might be 600, 550, 600 for a vacuum feed of the same size. Pumps will last probably about 15 years, and the structure's about 30 years. And so that's kind of what we have just with that table. The other items that are on that page, I'll talk about as we go. For our recommendations from a public works standpoint and looking at what options we have for a lift station. So although we prefer to have wastewater go into the gravity fed system, we know that there are areas of the system where a lift station might be the only option. Developer will bear all costs to construct and complete the facility without any option for reimbursement or impact fee credit, as they are not part of the impact fee schedule. So I just kind of did that statement on the top really quick. And then Public Works recommends that we implement a city standard and spec for developer constructed sanitary sewer lift stations for all residential commercial development. When I say residential commercial development, that's going to be any development that has residential to it. So even though we have, and I will talk about just some commercial stuff, if we have a development that has residential to it, I think the city needs to operate that lift station for the benefit of the residents so that we maintain and can operate and keep that lift station in working order without having to depend on the developer or their management consultant to manage. Once the lift station has been constructed and passed out by the city, the lift station is then given to the city to operate and maintain with a minimum warranty of 1 year. And just some things at a minimum that we kind of looked at, the standard should include, we are recommending that it be a vacuum feed type pump system with dual pumps. 3 vaults, the open metering station with a grinder. We would like to have the grinder as part of our lift station, the wet well vault, the valve vault as part of as the 3 vaults. The partial flume with the ultrasonic flow meter, wastewater flow sampler, a diesel generator that is sized for the system for power outages. Minimum of a 10-foot by 10-foot CMU control building for electrical SCADA cabinets, a chain link fence with barbed wire on all sides, and the ability to connect to a gravity-fed system in the future once development got to the point where we could gravity feed it into the system. And then outside lighting for security, capable for night repair and maintenance work. So those are kind of some of the minimum recommendations we had for a lift station. We still, and we have some today, we have a few in the system right now that are single commercial developments that have a lift station to them. And so these are ones without residential, which are recommended to be privately owned and operated by the commercial owner. Has the ability to tie into the gravity-fed system when available. We have a half a dozen or so right now in town that use these type of systems. That they're lifting wastewater into our fed system this way. If we do have just a commercial that comes up that needs a lift station like this, our recommendation is we still go with this route. However, like I said before, if we have a residential commercial development that comes in, we'd rather see a city-owned lift station be constructed and not these single. We don't want to have too many of the single lift stations out there like this. Typical layout of just what a lift station would look like. Influent meaning that's wastewater that is coming into the system. Effluent's wastewater leaving the lift station. So the metering and grinder station, the wet well and the valve vault, generator and a control electrical building. I'd also like if these are built in where we have a culinary water line that's close by, I'd like to also see a frost-free hydrant put in as well to help with cleaning activities if we have culinary water available. That helps keep things cleaned and keep things maintained. So before we go into questions and discussions, I just want to go over the rest of a couple other things that I have on the handout I gave you. So going to the second, JUB did help me with a few things on this presentation, and they have some projects that they did the year they were constructed, the construction costs and the configuration. So it gives you an idea of some other lift stations that have been done just in the state of Utah, and kind of what those price tags were and what type of system they are. Submersible being wet well or wet pit, if those that say submersible on them. Wet pit, dry pit for those that are probably more of a dry pit system. Vacuum prime, suction lift, or more suction or vacuum type systems. So I have there, and then on the back page, I just have a few more things about pump removal, I'm not going to be able to say that word. Roger?
Customizability? Customizability.
Expandability of the three types, and then just average flows, number of pumps, cost-wise, suction condition, pump maintenance. Some of that stuff I did use in my presentation as we kind of went through the presentation. And so that's kind of the presentation in a nutshell. I could probably do a 4-hour, rural water presentation on all of this, but I kind of gave you the tip of the iceberg for this presentation. And I know you don't want to be here until midnight.
4 hours.
The JUB presentation that they kind of sent me that I kind of went through a little bit, it was over 100 slides. But it talked a lot about design and criteria and stuff like that, and I just didn't want to get into a lot of that kind of stuff. So, questions, any discussion? I know Dave's probably got a lot of questions wrote down.
No, actually, I don't. I was just sitting here thinking, especially when you said the 4-hour thing, and even though I agree, I don't necessarily want to sit and listen to it for 4 hours. But the bottom line is, when I hit that button, I want it to leave. So this is important. This is important. So if I have to sit here 4 hours, I'll sit here 4 hours to listen to it.
Yeah, and with that, we do have a developer that is trying to get a decision on a development they're trying to do, just kind of on the north side of Lydiard's, that would not gravity feed into our existing sewer without a force main and a lift station. And so this is kind of a precursor to at least start getting the ball rolling and maybe get a decision to them on if we're going to allow a lift station or not.
Is that the only area that would really be affected, or are there some others too?
Yeah, I think at least on the north side of town, once you get across SR 36, then it's a lot easier. And I think once a lot of the development happens on the west side of 36 on that side of town, then it might be a little easier to get this one tied into the system. They're kind of coming to the table first, and so they want to get their development going before our west SR 36 development gets going. On the south end of town, we really don't have a whole lot on the south end of town. And so, yeah, when it comes to lift stations, and if we're putting any lift stations in, it'll probably be that section of town that would need them.
When you put in a lift station, because then you said it can connect to the gravity-fed system.
Yeah.
Does it just bypass the lift station at that point and you're done using the lift station, or do you still use it somehow?
No, the lift station then will be done. And so then we just take it from the lift station and tie it into the gravity-fed
Okay, just
system.
tie it in then.
Yeah, so we just tie it in. So whatever we do and the development, as the development comes together, we'd make sure that development has prepared for it to be tied in to the gravity-fed system once that's available. And so the lift station would be able to go and be a lift station, but it'll also have the ability to get switched over once that is able to be done.
Does the developer bear that cost when that eventually happens? Like, they get it to the point where it can be,
Yeah, they should. Yeah, they should bear that cost that once it gets done. I mean, for the most part, the developer will prepare that lift station for that tie-in, and so hopefully it's pretty minimal to just be able to connect it into the gravity system once that gravity system comes by. So hopefully the cost there is not too great to be able to
but if
switch it
this
over.
is 10 years
could be
down
long
the
gone.
road, yeah.
Yeah.
So you
yeah.
have a lift station that it can be set up to go to the gravity-fed system, but 10 years down the road, how do you make sure the developer pays to tie that in is
Yeah,
my
to take,
biggest
yeah,
concern.
it could be years down the road. I mean, Lydia's, Roger, a couple weeks ago, supplied me with some minutes on just some lift stations, stuff that kind of happened in the past. And when Lydiard's got put in for their lift station, it was supposed to be just a temporary, lift station that was supposed to get tied into the system. And that was 2004. So it's 20 years ago for on a temporary lift station. So, yeah, so temporary could mean, next week or 20, 30, 40 years. End of life, maybe for a lift station as well.
Well, we only have 15 years on the one pump, it says.
Yeah,
Get it together.
Does the lift station at Lydiard's, is that managed
by
them?
Lydiard's, yeah, it's a private
Private.
lift station that's managed by them. With that, if something happens to that lift station, then Lydiard's can just close the door, right? They close the door, they're closed. We don't have a lift station that's working, if a pump goes out or they have issues with it. You can't go and tell 100 residents that they can't use the toilet because the lift station's down. So that's kind of why we want to be able to manage that lift station, so that if there is issues with that lift station, then we can manage that and keep that lift station going. The commercial single lift station in the past, that's been, the rule of thumb is that they just close business until they get it back up and running again.
You said there's a few of them around town?
Yes, Lydiard's, Zaxby's, Domino's, Starbucks, that little strip mall right there. They're all, and have a lift station. Our home, is our home on 1000
yeah.
North, that assisted living center, it's on a lift station as well. So, yeah, we've got a few single commercial ones in town.
And so the ones that are on residential, this probably won't affect, 'cause I know there's some people that have them in their basement of their house,
Yeah.
just the little residential ones.
Residential ones. It's usually, sometimes that's just to lift the basement. Sometimes the upstairs is already gravity fed into the system, but they might be lifting their basement up to it. That's still considered a gravity fed system, even though it's just a lift station in their basement. So this would be where the whole development, is having to go to a lift station because that whole development is below the sewer, our gravity fed sewer. Which the closest one we have is, 2400 North on that north side of town.
Right.
I'm fine with it. You're the expert, so I'm going to go with what you said.
Yeah, okay.
Well, if we're gonna try and get the developer to pay for it, they're gonna want us to do the cheap one, and we're gonna wanna do the better one. The more the more
Are
effective
you
one.
the
Are
developers?
you guys the developers?
Yeah,
That's why you shake your head no when he said the cheap one.
That's why we'd have to change the code, text in the code to say what our standards are, what our specifications are. And a lot of that, it's going to depend on how big the development is and what kind of flows they're going to be. And
Does this
Maybe a
have a
small one will work.
residential component to it?
Yes, it does.
It's commercial and residential.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
So if you want to go back, Loretta, to the typical lift station layout, so in a standard and spec, even though this is, I'm not an engineer, so this is not my engineered drawing of a typical layout, but this is kind of what I would envision our standard being, as something similar to this that kind of shows the components of our lift station, and then what we're going to require for the wet well, the valve vault, the grinder station, you know, what we're going to require for a generator, what we're going to require for the control building, and then it would be up to the developer to say, yeah, we can meet that requirement, or no, we don't want to do that, and then, you know, do they do their development or not. But from a public works standpoint, we want to do a city standard and spec, have that published, and then they would follow that standard and spec, just like we would do a road section or, you know, a manhole or a stop sign. You know, we have standards and specs for all that kind of stuff. And same thing with the lift station. We just put a standard and spec together and have them follow that.
Any other questions?
We all know I'm a big fan of standards and specs, so, yeah.
Yeah, so Jamie, I guess the alternative, if the council does not want to pursue a policy of lift stations, is for east side developers to install a new interceptor
Yeah.
all the way, and then bore under the highway and then take it all the way to either to the plant or another existing interceptor.
Yeah, so that's another option that we can do. And so for this development, that means they'd go under SR 36, run a line down and tie it in. It's probably about 400 west area, you know, down by the temple or so, where they would have to get to a gravity-fed sewer to get their wastewater conveyed down to the plant.
They'd have to go to 400 west from
Yeah, it's
SR
about
36.
400, yeah. So that's where we're
I
at
assume
with
you don't wanna do
sewer.
that.
So,
Technology has changed. It changes every day. And so something that couldn't happen 10 or 20 years ago can now happen today. So,
Our newest interceptor is Interceptor C, and the city built that one, but established a reimbursement area and had a financial advisor firm determine which area would benefit from it and what the contribution of each future home would be to that. And so we funded that and collected back the cost as the area developed.
So when Lydiard's was built 20 years ago, was there discussion of having them go to 400 West or wherever they would connect, or was it?
Yeah, there was discussion, but it seemed
Oh, that's right.
disproportionate for one store
Right.
to have to do that.
Yeah.
We probably need to come up with some kind of policy of what we're going to do then, right?
As you have growth, so this is one development, and then I'm just picturing in my head, if you have more development to the east, does it feed into this system? Or would that be separate somehow? Like they have to have their own lift station or?
yeah, so just for discussion points, we have a development, say we have a development, you know, going in on the east side of 36, and they do their development, they do a lift station, and then we have another developer that comes that's just east of them, right? They could possibly come to this lift station. This lift station might need to have upsize of pumps or something like that to handle that flow. If we're already dealing with 100 gallons per minute, now we're going to have another 100 coming, we might have to upsize some pumps to make up for that, which that developer will probably have to pay for that upsize in that lift station. But it wouldn't create another lift station. We would just try to get that water conveyed to this current lift station.
And this area though is kind of unique, right? Because it's not a huge area. A lot of it's, a little portion of it's Tooele City, right? Then there's a railroad track, and then it's county.
Yeah.
Okay. Just trying to picture in my head the city
Yeah, I wish,
map.
I guess I
But there's
should've
quite a
had
bit of
map
area.
that area.
It's probably
Over
more
there
than, yeah, it
along-
looks like on a map,
There's quite a
right?
bit of area there, because think
Yeah.
of all the people who've come trying to build
yeah.
apartments there, and there are all those different lots.
So there's a hotel that, isn't that
The Microtel Moda Hotel?
Yeah, is that
Yeah,
on the
but
lift
it's,
station or?
it's,
On the
no,
other
it's
side.
on the other side of 2400 North.
Okay, so it was
So,
easier
yeah,
for them
so,
to just-
yeah, so anything prior to 2400 North is fine.
okay.
It'd be anything north of 2400 North.
Okay.
north of Lydiard's.
Yeah, north of Lydiard's.
Any other questions?
No, I think we probably should do what, and come up with a plan.
Can
And
you
I think,
limit it to the east side of SR 36, though?
Limit it to whatever you want.
Well, you'd only have them put it in if it was necessary, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it would naturally limit itself, kind of thing?
Yeah, and there's development that's going to happen on the west side, sooner or later. And then eventually, once 400 West gets up to 36, and it'll be easier to get that wastewater conveyed into a gravity system. Just who comes first, the west side or the east side, and getting things tied in. Sometimes you get some developers, like the east side developers, wanting to get moving now, and a west side developer, they're wanting to move too, but just not as fast as the east side.
So when they're all
So-
developed, will that require another interceptor? Or, I don't really know how those work. Or will it just naturally feed in and be okay?
I think some of that could be naturally be fed in. When UDOT did Main Street, which was 2015, give or take, when they did Main Street, UDOT did some casings underneath 36, and so we have some casings under 36. We had some done at 2400, which I think those are the ones we're using now, and then there was some others that were put in 3000 north area of 36, and so there are some casings already in the ground, and so once we get development close to 36 and we can find those casings, we could put sewer line, water line across 36
Okay.
and get it tied in. And so there is a casing there that can be accessed right now to get a sewer line or a water line across 36 without having to bore a line under 36. But you still, in this case, they're still having to go from 36 to 400
Right.
to get it conveyed. And so once we get sewer that's in that area that we can convey it, it could all gravity feed from their development through that casing, through that sewer line under 36, and then down to 400.
Makes sense.
Okay, any other questions, comments?
We would like to move forward if you are in support to putting those standards together, and we'll bring them back to you. Okay.
Are you okay with my recommendations for Public Works on a lift station standard? Would you like to see
Expert.
You're the
things
expert.
different?
Then you come back with it, then we have a discussion on what you come back with
Back.
as a final decision.
Yep.
Yeah.
Probably the one that's easier to maintain, a vacuum feed.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
vacuum feed.
Yeah.
I think from just a standpoint, safety standpoint, for my employees, as well as just kind of maintenance, the vacuum feed system, I think's an easier system. Gets rid of the confined space kind of stuff that I have to deal with that type of system, especially when it comes to wastewater, because I have been in a wet well, at the bottom of a wet well with a sewer line above me that's off right now, but it's backing up behind me because we do have it plugged off, but it was backing up, and you're only as good as that plug, right? So the plug goes, and you're under a bunch of wastewater pretty dang quick. And so, that's why I tend to not like the wet well systems as much.
All right, thanks, Jamie.
Thanks, Jamie.
Okay, thank you.
We'll move on to our next discussion item, which is a discussion on Resolution 2023-101, a resolution of the Tooele City Council consenting to the one-time payment of a retention bonus to school resource officers assigned on a regular full-time basis to a school for the 2023-2024 school year. This is presented by Chief Adrian Day. Police Chief Adrian Day. Sorry, I left that out.
Thank you, Council. Juvenile justice reform in 2017 changed police interaction with juveniles. The intention of this reform was early intervention and evidence-based programs for youth who become involved with the justice system. I went to a training where it's kind of explained we don't want to brand a child as a criminal by putting them in our car repeatedly, by sending them to court repeatedly. They become a criminal. I agree with the positive results for most of the kids who are in school. Even if some are defiant at first, they they ultimately listen to teachers or administrators. However, the small percentage that break rules, defy administration, commit crimes, and continuously disrupt this productive learning environment remains, and ultimately the school resource officer must handle the student they're looked to do this. And it's hard to intervene when reform has made it so we can't charge a crime unless it meets a Class B misdemeanor or above. Administrators will look to officers often, and it leads us to use physical force to end a problem when evidence-based solutions are not working. The line between a behavior issue and a crime gets confused. A school often wants my officers to deal with both. This year, a school was trying to put an office for an SRO in a behavior unit, which I said no to. If they're going to be there with the behavior kids, maybe they should just be a school employee trained to deal with those programs. School resource officers at the high school and their sergeant dealt with a juvenile yesterday who was reported to have brought a gun to school. Through my SRO talking to a neighboring agency SRO, it appears this high school student was suspended from another high school and had to meet certain criteria to get back in, and instead of meeting that criteria, enrolled in our high school. I feel the small percentage are not held accountable. A problem I've heard repeatedly is the school district will not kick those out who need to be permanently. This puts a high stress on my officers with complaints from parents and makes it impossible to provide this safe and healthy environment. This is why my SRO program is undesirable, and it's hard to get somebody interested in it. So I am proposing, from a great suggestion from our HR director, paying $3,000 to an SRO at the end of the school year if they remain there all school year, and $1,500 if we're half, because we are approaching that point, and I'd rather have a officer willing than losing one to another agency because they don't want to be an SRO. This request is only for this school year and instead of continuously, because I want to see if it's effective. There's a current bill. We'll see where it goes. That may affect it. And I want to change possibly our MOU with the school district. No matter how understaffed we are, the schools are always fully staffed. So the streets suffer, the services provided to the city suffer, where the schools do not. Understaffing has an amount in there that we can cover this much with the budgeted salary, and I'm bringing this back to the business meeting and can answer any questions you may have.
Is 3 enough?
That's what I was going to ask.
So 3 are what the school district pays for.
3,000.
Oh, 3,000. 3 SROs. Possibly. Let's see if there's interest.
And do you know whether or not other school districts around the state are offering a retention bonus? And if they are, how much are they giving their officers?
Certain agencies, police agencies, pay more to be an SRO. If that's, I wouldn't mind that in the budget if we have one that wants to remain in there, but I hate giving a salary, then they come out and that salary's not there.
Correct.
And now they're going to seek somewhere else to pay that salary.
Yeah, and I only said that because I believe in retention bonuses, because we do occasionally, especially in your line of work, because we need you guys, and they need to stay in the schools. And if from my perspective, if we have to come up with something to keep the officers in the school, I mean, it would, to me, it would be up to us to make that happen. And if we feel that it's costing us a lot, we can go to the school board and say, hey, you need help. You know what I mean? And to keep those officers in the schools, because we don't want them to come out. And if you have to get other officers to be on the street, then we got to look at that as well. And it's just something we can't go without policing. We just can't.
Yes, yes.
So the chief is being very humble on how serious this issue is for our department. Right now, we have one officer who is pursuing other employment for the pure sake of he wants out of the school, does not see a way to get out of the school. We've had the highest turnover. In fact, we haven't had one person who stayed in that since Hilliard, have we? We put out an announcement asking for interest, and nobody is interested. It's viewed almost as a punishment to have to go into the school. It is not positive for the school district nor us to put somebody in there that can't interact with the kids. One of the challenges that we talked about, though, is money going to entice our officers to want this assignment, and how much money will entice them? So we talked about, let's just raise their pay right now, and that was something we explored. But how much? And then it's a permanent raise. So in order to get somebody out of there that's not a good fit, now we're demoting them back down, and they've got those merit protections. So for this year, we just ran some numbers, and it equates to about $2 an hour more for these officers. That is not money that we've included to pass on to the school district. That has been a topic, and this year was, do I use the word contentious? Is that an appropriate word? I'll say lots of discussion about the cost for law enforcement officers. And we actually came in with our rate, and shortly after, we all saw what Grantsville did. We're about $5 an hour under Grantsville right now on our police wages, because they made a drastic and significant. So the school district got the benefit of our costs in terms of our negotiation, and we've not passed this on to them, but the contract has been signed, and we recognize that. So part of next year's budget will be discussing, like you said, the entire contract, working with the mayor, seeing if money attracts the right people. One of our challenges we still face is we have high turnover in our police force. And so getting those experienced, maybe people who know how to work with the kids. You know, you think a lot of our new officers are 20 to 25 years old. They're just having their own babies, let alone the joy of being able to interact with teenagers. Is that a fair statement? And so once we get some of those more tenured officers and get them up into that level, that's the group we're trying to entice to go into the school for the benefit of the school as well as our agency. It just has take that level of expertise. We can't put a rookie officer in the high school and have it effective. Another thing that we have explored, Chief, if you're okay if I just add a little bit more, was if this doesn't work, we may need to separate out and recruit for school resource officers and hire the right people, and that's their assignment. And if they want to come back to the police department and work patrol or investigations, they'd have to go through the process to get a job as a regular police officer. Part of the challenge you get there is we've got to be appropriately staffed at the school, because as we are explaining, when somebody goes off on potentially 12 weeks of protected FMLA, or they're injured at the school, right now the school district is pulling now from our already tapped out and low staffed. When I say low, it's not because we don't have the positions. It's because it takes us so long to get them into the academy, get them through field training to where they're working productively on the street. And the turnover is still impacting us in patrol. But right now, we anticipated a sergeant who would be substituting maybe 50% of his time, and he has been substituting and covering with almost full-time commitment to the school. So that's part of the whole discussion as well, is making sure that if you choose to provide this service to our community and our school district, we may need to rediscuss making sure we are having enough school resource officers to effectively staff the school resource program. So those are some of the dynamics that we've been dealing with, and why right now we're going to try for the remainder of this year a bonus to keep our officers in there that are there. That would bring their pay up a little bit more in line with some of our other SROs in the valley, and then give them an incentive that if you stay and play, you get it. If not, and you pull out voluntarily, that would be something you'd forfeit. Thank you for letting me add that.
So in 2025, when Deseret opens, we're going to need officers there as well, right?
This is hard to even comment on, but yes, the current bill talks about SRO, security, or what they call a guardian in every school. We may have some decisions coming up. The school district may want us to cover every school. We may not want to. It may be a...
True.
Granite School District already has its own police department. How many schools does it cover? Quite a few, but yeah. Ultimately, under statute, it falls under the county sheriff to make sure this is covered too, currently.
Well, I definitely support it, but I had the same question. Is it enough to entice them to stay? And I guess if it's not enough, do you just come back and we try to increase that, or?
Roger, would it be possible as part of tonight, when they approve this, can they put a provision that if we don't see the effect with 3,000, they would give us the discretion to increase that amount without having to bring it back?
I don't know for sure, but this seems like a really important and challenging policy issue. And if you want to change the policy approach, they probably ought to be involved in the change of policy decision. So I think I would suggest that it come back if increased funding is needed.
If we can do it within the budget that we've already got, would that change the circumstances? And one thing, your compensation policy is what you guys approve under our handbook. You approve the budget, and then you give us the parameters to administer employee compensation within those parameters. There's not a provision currently that lets us do a retention bonus and under what circumstances. There's a generic statement that we have the right to meet emergencies and do what we need, but for transparency, we feel it's always important to bring back to you these types of important compensation matters, and make sure you know what the issue is and that you're on board. Because this is the only position that we have discussed and proposed a retention program, but it's so unique because we're under contract with the school district. That's the different factor that we've got.
I want to find balance to FTO, field training officers who train incoming officers. At other agencies, they get more pay. We don't here either. I don't want to get it so high that, oh, wait a minute, what about the things I'm doing, important things I'm doing too? But, you know, it's just, I'm trying to find the right balance.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
A sergeant who goes in and he's almost in that school daily, none of this is for him either, right?
Right. Yeah. I think 3,000 is a good starting point then, and obviously I think it should be more, but I've seen firsthand what the officers deal with, not from just high school kids, but like at the hospital. It's insane how people treat officers, and I have the utmost respect for you and your officers, so.
I appreciate that.
Agreed.
Okay, this will be in our business meeting as well, so we'll vote on it tonight as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chief Day. All right, our next item is a closed meeting to discuss litigation and/or property acquisition. So I will entertain a motion to move to a closed meeting.
Mr. Chair, I move that we move to a closed meeting to discuss litigation and property acquisition.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. We'll take it to a vote. Councilman McCall?
Aye.
Councilman Hanson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Manzione?
Aye.
I'm Councilman Brady. I also vote aye. It passes 4-0. We will recess here and reconvene in the large conference room.
I got mine.